Okay, so chapter 2 lecture, this will be the first part. 2.1, you guys, it's just simply the characteristics of life. You should know these already, but sometimes they're broken down into a longer list. Sometimes, they're combined. This book chooses to get pretty detailed, so you can see it's many bullets long. So the characteristics that all life have, as we've defined, are they all can take in and convert materials, we've been talking about this, and energy from the environment. And throughout these reactions, they're going to make products. Some they don't need, so that would be waste products as well. And again, we heard this through one of your guys' presentations. They all have a high degree of chemical organization compared to non-living things, just very complex bodies. When you think of a rock, it has different minerals, maybe it has crystals and things in it, and you could say it's complex. But you can't really compare that, say, to an elephant or a tortoise and how complex that is. And then, of course, this pulling this thing all together makes the bodies of the organisms, and that is responsible for what they look like and what they do. And I challenge you guys to think beyond what you consider alive, things that you relate to, because there's little things we can't see that are alive. Bacteria, we heard about some of the decomposers. And lots of times we concentrate on just animals, but there's the plants and the other living things. Okay, again, the main definition, all life has a genetic code. So we're talking about DNA and RNA, and this code is used to build the organism and maintain it, help it do all its activities. All organisms sense and react to changes in the environment, so they collect information. They all grow and develop. You started out as an egg and a sperm in reality, right? And then we have all these different developmental times as we've grown into, you guys are almost into full adults. But other things are even way more different and interesting than that, like dragonflies have little larvae that swim in the water. You guys are really familiar with the caterpillars and the butterflies, tadpoles and frogs. So there are these developmental stages that have evolved. And then, of course, just growing in general, as well as, replacing, damaged tissue and things like that. And then, of course, they have to reproduce, and their offspring look pretty close to them. And they communicate with similar organisms. Even plants communicate. They send out chemical messages. If you guys have ever noticed in the forests, many times the trees actually are not touching each other when they grow. If they're like the same species, they want their own space. And so lots of times we don't see the other organisms like we see ours. We think we're so complex and we do it this way. But you have to look on different levels to see things that are very different than us, and that, yes, they communicate too. And then they move. And again, on their own timeline, but plants do move. Some things allow free energy with movement, like drifting plankton and things like that. But are they spinning their cells also within that, maybe to collect energy? So that's 2.1. So I'm going to jump to 2.6, and we're going to talk about enzymes. Now, do you guys remember what enzymes are? Enzymes fit into one of the 4 organic molecule groups. What are enzymes? What? They are proteins. Okay? And remember, proteins have there's a lot of different types of proteins, and then therefore they have a lot of different functions. So enzymes help reactions occur inside organisms. And they do this by lowering activation energy. I'll show you a graph in a second. But also they're a catalyst. Okay, so look for these relationships when you guys are studying. So enzyme are a type of catalyst. What are catalysts? They're anything. So they can be non-living, a spark, friction, movement. That can be a catalyst to starting a reaction. But enzymes are molecules, they're proteins, like we said, that help reactions happen inside cells. Now they're very specific to the reaction that they help. They fit with the substrate. Now let's get this straight right now. Substrates are just the reactants in an equation. So you can use them interchangeably. I don't know, make things more complicated. When they brought up enzymes, they decided to call it the reactant, a substrate. And it probably has to do with this model that I'm challenging you guys to talk about on Edmodo, that they fit into each other. And speaking of that Edmodo, you guys need to get on there and talk amongst your groups. And I actually saw at lunch or prep earlier, I did see some conversations that were right on talking about this stuff. So you could see with this graph that if an enzyme was not involved, that for the substrates, the reactants, to start to react with each other, you need to go up this hill. You need that much energy. That's the activation energy. And then the product is made. Okay, but look at with an enzyme, it's a smaller amount. So let's watch this.
Each type of enzyme catalyzes only one or a few specific reactions. The specific reaction catalyzed by an enzyme depends on a small area of its tertiary structure called the active site. The active site has a shape that closely matches the shape of the starting molecule or molecules. The close fit of the starting molecule, called the substrate, into the active site of the enzyme brings the enzyme and substrate close together. Because enzymes are not rigid, sometimes the binding of the substrate induces it to adjust its shape slightly, providing a better fit between enzyme and substrate. Once the chemical reaction occurs, the newly formed molecules break away, leaving the enzyme the same as it was before the reaction. Many reactions catalyzed by enzymes are reversible. With the aid of enzymes, two reacting molecules may combine to form a single molecule, or the single molecule may convert into the two smaller molecules.
It's very important for you guys to understand that the enzyme is not part of the reaction. It's not a reactant, it's not a product, and it can be used over and over again. Think about, you could see that one, just even when the two things come in, they're attracted to that spot on the enzyme, it's going to align them perfectly to now react with each other. So just a simple mechanical help there. I've seen other models where the enzyme, it was a decomposition reaction where we took something, one substrate or reactant, and it had to break apart. Well, I saw where when it gets in there, it causes tension in the shape of that protein, that enzyme. And so that tension with its reactant or substrate in there is making it break apart easier. So again, it's just simple chemistry, how it helps. It's not magic. Again, they said reversible there, and you would need a whole new enzyme that would bond correctly to the products now, which are now going to be reactants, right? Because we're going to go backwards. Okay, vocab word metabolism. So in all the reactions that happen inside an organism, all their cells, that's what metabolism means. And we need these enzymes for metabolism to occur in a timely amount that the organisms can survive, really. Okay, so a little review, I think here. The building up of reactants when the reactions are making bigger products out of smaller ones, that's called synthesis, right? And then, what do you think the opposite one's called? Things that are breaking them down. Yep. Okay, so then decomposition, decomposing. So the one we saw back there on that animation, which one was that? It was a synthesis. Okay, so let's hear this.
In decomposition reactions, complex molecules break down into simpler molecules. Decomposition reactions release energy in the form of heat and chemical energy. They produce simple molecules from complex molecules, which increases entropy. Cells use some of the energy and simple molecules to produce biomolecules in a process known as biosynthesis. Biosynthesis is a type of synthesis that involves biomolecules. Thus, synthesis and decomposition reactions in the cell are coupled to energy flow and the cycling of matter. This is an important characteristic of living cells.
So there was a lot in there. Okay, so maybe when you kind of read this section or just looking at this diagram, you can try and see how many questions I could ask you about this. You know, building things up, what's it called? Breaking them down. Every time we break bonds, you're going to get what available? The free energy. Okay, you know, big molecules to small molecules. Okay, so then our last section here is on energy transfer in ATP. So first, when it is decomposition, it's called oxidation. And you'll see later, there's a couple reactions where oxygen actually is losing or taking up electrons. And so we call this oxidation. And the oxygen is very reactive, and it does attract things. And like you guys think about it, you know, if you leave your bikes outside, you know, it's going to rust. It's because of the oxygen. That's what's damaging, or well, we consider it damaging. It's really just change to the molecules. So anyway, again, all these reactions happening. Now, ATP, this is the molecule, you guys, that powers all the reactions. Okay, not glucose. Glucose is too large of a molecule. It holds way too much energy. It reminds me if I asked you to warm up a can of soup, and I come back and, you know, you lit the whole log. And now, you know, now we've got all this waste of energy, and it's not being utilized, you know, we got boiling soup, we're good, but we just was very wasteful. So what happens is through respiration, I think it was one of the first groups that talked a little bit with photosynthesis and respiration and this movement, that we break down sugar to make a bunch of ATPs, and then we have just the perfect little molecule for just the perfect amount of energy to do just the perfect amount of work that we need. So it's this ATP molecule. It's called adenosine triphosphate, and there it is. And it's called triphosphate because why? We have 3 phosphate groups. Okay, we have 3 phosphate groups right here. Now, if we were to break off one of those phosphate groups, we would be left with a what? What's that? It's not an ATP, what is it? An ADP, and what do you think the D is standing for? Di. Because how many phosphates does it have? 2. Now, this is analogous to a battery that you can recharge. Because the ATP is the battery full, and then the ATP, I don't know, maybe half full. But instead of draining it all the way, because you could actually yank off another one of those phosphates and get some energy. But instead of draining it that much, it's easier if we just go ahead and recharge it, give it back its phosphate when we have a surplus of energy, like if we're breaking down sugar. And so it goes back and forth, as you can see with that cycle between ADP and ATP. Need energy, break off a phosphate. Have some extra energy, let's recharge that AT to an ATP. Okay? So again, it's just amazing how life has utilized all these compounds for just tasks, perfectly for them. Okay, so like I said, we're using ATP, living things are. And then we're going to stop right there.